Well, my name is Sergio Ramirez Flores. I'm truly honored to be presenting today in this symposium. Thank you to everyone in the Symbol group for allowing us to share this experience with you, and of course, with all the audience for the interest. I'll try to be brief and in order to follow the schedule. Actually, I'm presenting now on behalf of the DUC, a group of academics at the Universidad Católica School of Design here in Santiago de Chile. Our work since 24, 25, I'm not sure, combines research and project execution in information design, mainly focused on public services. Here in this slide, you can see 2 projects about transport and user information system. In case you don't know where Chile is located, we are there in the red color. Yeah, as a developing country, tourism is a very important activity for Chilean economy. And you can see here some numbers related to the contribution of tourism to our national economy. And for example, the GDP, the percentage of the GDP and the employment. And in summary, it's very extraordinary important activity. Here there are 4 images that summarize some of the most famous landscapes in the southern Chile, Easter Island, the wine valleys, and also the desert. It's not here, but these photos are accompanied by some pictograms we designed for this project. We are talking about now here at Atacama deserts. Actually, the pictograms I'm presenting now were part of a bigger project that include the redesign of the Tourist Information Office and Cernatur Visual Identity. Cernatur stands for National Tourist Service. In this context, pictograms emerged as a key element for consistency because they were implemented in interior design, brochures, maps, stationery, of course, and a broad range of information pieces. Because it's about tourism, we've mostly focused on our research on pictograms related to this field. But tourism is actually a very big topic that gather subtopics such as accommodation, recreation, sports, services, transport, and so on. So a very important step was to understand the structure of a symbol set, different standards from different countries, different approaches. Yeah, you can see here 3 pages of different standards. And we look for not only graphic reference, but also about categorization. The amount of pictograms were important for our decisions. Probably the most important reference was the previous set that existed since late 60s. This mostly on road signage, not exclusively, but mostly for roads in an illustrative style. These pages belong to the graphic manual for roads published by the Ministry of Public Works several times. And this manual includes the Cernatur pictograms. There's no exact date, probably since 1965, these pictograms were made without reference or international standards. And as you can see, there are several inconsistencies, even though they were available online for digital handling. The style and the way of production forced to be fabricated analogously and mechanically. The first approaches, so the first big step, was to develop these sheets that are an international benchmark. For each pictogram, we convey a review that include, for example, the World Tourism Organization, which has promoted standardized symbols since the 90s. Just as a recommendation, they don't have their own system. Guidelines such as the Symbol Sourcebook, of course, the Cook and Shanovsky AIA manuals as a standard, of course. You talked about this standard before. The handbook of pictorial symbols, of course, the Motley's book, and some standards like the British standard, the NPS from the US. Regional and local systems were also reviewed. We especially focus on our neighbors, Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru, basically in order to track some of the elements that they use and to include some of in our standard. Also, some culturally closer standards, such as the Mexico, Spain, and Portugal system. You can see here the sheet for archaeology. We collect these different approaches and reference in order to find patterns, understand or refine our selection or some symbols, sorry. Because, for example, here in archaeology, the elements used are mostly local meaning, but yeah, you can compare, for example, the Mexico symbol and the British idea of archaeology. But here in the left, you can see the pictogram for beach that is pretty generic with this umbrella, what's the name, sunshade as an icon. So there are different approaches for different I want to emphasize the idea of the step of categorization because these categories are useful for those who manage this kind of data, not necessarily for final users, but we try to generate a clear organization to be more efficient and more, I don't know, because at that time we know that governmental institutions are uncoordinated efforts, especially here in Chile. So some way users will develop their own categories and interpreted symbols based on the context and personal experience, but categories are used for implementation, to succeed, to generate a successful implementation. I won't speak too much about, because the last two presentations was about human body, but we try to represent activities with people involved, not only with the object, such as, I don't know, the motorcycle, the ski, also the garbage can. There's a glimpse of the design process. At that time, the group, and I think we're still now very interested in the work of George Ames and Marinoir at Isotype, Otto Leicher, City. Here in Chile, there's few exponents of pictographic work. Probably the most relevant was the 1978 Santiago subway system. So we usually have to look abroad for information and analysis. Here are some of the details of this system that is not longer in use, but it was for almost 30 years. Some particularities from the Chilean context, we pick visual ideas that combine meanings such as food, landscape, or culture, responding to a local context. Fish and wine as a stereotype of Chilean food, even though it doesn't work in every single situation, it's very likely to find these elements in the food, in our food, in our restaurants. Here there's a comparison before and after the project with the original set and the one we developed. During the conceptualization and forgiving process, the design of symbols emphasize the simplicity to facilitate representation and activities under different context constraints. Contextual meaning, as I said before, familiarity for local and foreign users, our neighbors, and different people coming to Chile. And of course, printing under different formats and technical capabilities, the size of the symbols were also important variables considered. Here you can see the system complete with 135 pictograms, which 202, I guess, not exactly, maybe more, maybe less, are new because like bird watching on Rappel, some activities that were not too common in the past. One of our conclusions was that despite the fact that there was some models to follow, touristic symbols didn't work as standardized symbols like the ISO symbols. It was discussed before in the previous presentations that many touristic symbols look similar, or have similar elements, but are not exactly the same, which leads to which country to embrace interpretation of concepts and activities, adding some cultural elements. For example, the idea of folklore is the opposite of generic. Could be a craft center be symbolized using a foreign craft, for example, or a foreign animal or a foreign type of food. Here, I'll be very fast with these photos of the office in the final stage of the project. You can see here some maps, that is map and interior design, and also the office itself works as an information piece, and the implementation actually has been very successful. The set has been included in some of the symbols have been included in the new national road font called Ruta CL, developed by Rodrigo Ramirez, who is part of the group here in Santiago. Maybe because it has been implemented successfully, the current status pushes us to deal with some new scenarios. Different ministries and some institutions and entities are requesting new symbols for a wide variety of purposes, independently, separately, not part as is not part of are not part of the same brief, from the civil registry, the electoral system, emerging office, metropolitan parks, to name a few. Here are some new symbols requested by the Ministry of National Assets. Same grid, same graphing criteria, but not commissioned by the same institution, which means, as I said before, not the same brief. This has been widening the options available, which could be very useful, but also kind of confusing on implementation, because some of the meaning are quite similar. Each one, each label here is in Spanish, but I hope everyone could understand what each pictogram is trying to say. Here, more pictograms. So we started with 79. The first standard ended with 135, and now we have more than 200 pictograms. So some actualization have taken place, as more than like an archipelago of briefings. Different publics has been asking new pictograms, and the first categorization was not longer useful or enough to respond to this new scenario. We have some questions during the process. We have work, and there are some questions that probably are quite the same with the emoji situation. Is there an optimal number of symbols for a pictorial system managed by a public entity? When does the number of symbols start to pose more problems than solutions in terms of communication and management? What are the best format of platforms for the management of complex symbols? It is a typeface, an Illustrator file. Consistency, especially for those who manage the symbols, is important to consider. Although we are using the same categories, but transport is not exactly the same as mobility. So for a system that has been constantly changing and expanding and used by uncoordinated entities, this adds complexity to the system implementation. And this is a difficult task and for us to manage and to solve as a problem. Despite these questions and challenges, the system has grown, as I said before, from 140 pictograms to more than 200. So it's a different scenario now. We are nowadays pushing for transforming it not only as a signature standard, not only for tourism, but also as a system for the entire state. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergio. And well done. You've got an incredibly difficult job here, because do you ever find that you'd quite like to redesign the old symbols from 2013? And
yeah, yeah, the project was a small task and suddenly became a huge and national effort.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to say is you've got the added problem of a sort of a Chilean national style, along with trying to be completely accessible and consistent. So you've almost got an impossible task here, and I just kept thinking of the Mexico Olympic symbol as a flavor of being Mexican, but that's really quite simple, and obviously it was all taken into the sort of like the style of the time, really. But I mean, well done. It's quite a task to keep this updated, but I hope that the government will set your system as a standard so that it can be consistent.
Yeah, actually, it was our intention to transform this small set in a standard, because for the government it's not an issue. After they saw the influence of these pictograms in northern Chile and Patagonia and different parts, they realized that this could be a good way, as you said, like put a Chilean flavor on the pictograms. But if you don't explain that, they don't realize that could be a very useful tool for communication.
Yeah, I just think it's a really difficult job that you've got to balance standardization and flavor. So well done. Good luck.
Thank you, Sue.
So do we have any more questions? Should we have a short panel discussion? So do we have any questions from anyone? Just going through.
I got a question here for Sergio. So you said that complexity was an issue. What were issues that entities or that you think you ran into?
Because they didn't ask for an international benchmark, but when we presented, they realized that, of course, USA, Spain, or like important countries for our culture, they have their own pictogram. They say it's like typeface. Why we are creating a new symbol if there isn't some symbols use it in different parts of the world, and we try to convince or try to explain that this availability and the cost of having their own system is better than to just picks from different parts of the world and create like a Frankenstein. And the idea of consistency and a style. We usually compare the pictograms to fonts, as Daniel said before. It works quite similar, and you can use one font with one system. But for the authorities, it's hard to convince that typefaces are something that you buy from someone or ask for someone to do it, and the pictograms has to show some kind of consistency and style, not only I don't know how to say it, but the previous one was and again an uncoordinated effort, and we tried to do it very coordinated from the beginning. I think that the political issue was more difficult than the graphic issue.
So how did you manage to convince them? Was that just go on, we're trying to say style works, or what?
It wasn't our first relation with government. We had been involved in transport and several projects, so we showed that experience before our previous work in Colombia also. So they like okay, yeah, we trust you.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was like a 4-year process to convince, to adapt, to implement. Of course, when you design a pictogram, you hope to see it implement in, I don't know, a map.
So do you think it's still managed well at the moment because it's quite such a long time ago?
The new briefs or the new commissions are quite new. The last one was commissioned last year, and it's not part of the same Illustrator file, but for us it's the same criteria. So they ask for just, I don't know, 30 new pictograms, but we add these new 30 pictograms to the one set. So it's our work, it's not the governmental work to maintain this standard.